Okay, let's unpack this. Today we are undertaking a deep dive into, well, the really extraordinary career and, frankly, complex personal life of Cornelius Crane Chevy Chase.
Yeah, this is quite a story.
It really is. It's a story of immediate, defining stardom, massive cultural influence, and a career path that's almost defined by these dramatic peaks and surprising valleys.
And conflict.
Mm.
A level of public and professional conflict that, honestly, few stars ever really navigate, let alone survive.
Right.
What's fascinating here, I think, is we're looking at more than just, a comedian's biography. We're really trying to analyze the anatomy of a breakthrough star whose success seemed rooted in contradiction.
So our mission today.
To dig into those foundational paradoxes of his success, we've got comprehensive sources detailing his elite, almost blue blood origins, his raw, physical, comedic talent.
Which was undeniable early on.
Absolutely. And then the significant personal complexities, the burdens, the reported trauma, the volatility that seem to fuel his incredible rise, but also kind of perpetually challenges longevity, especially in collaborative settings.
It's a really potent mix. And when you think about his cinematic legacy, I mean, you realize he created characters who are still cultural touchstones today.
Oh, definitely.
You instantly conjure Ty Webb, right? Effortlessly cool, often detached. Or Irwin Fletcher, the quipping master of disguise reporter.
A classic.
And of course, the immortal, high energy, but totally disastrous dad, Clark Griswold from the National Lampoon's vacation movies.
You can't escape Clark Griswold.
No way. These roles didn't just succeed. They really defined a whole era of cinematic comedy, particularly in the 80s.
But, his importance isn't just measured by those movie grosses, big as they were. Before all that film success,
Yeah.
he was the undisputed breakout star, the singular force, really, of Saturday Night Live's initial, completely groundbreaking cast.
That first season.
Just think about the scope of that influence. In one single season, he essentially defined the entire franchise's original tone.
He set the blueprint.
Exactly. For that self-aware, often deadpan, slightly arrogant sketch humor that became the show's signature identity. He immediately established SNL as, a cultural phenomenon, not just another TV show.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the origin of that deadpan arrogance, as Rolling Stone called it, we have to start at the beginning, his background. Because it is, well, it's not typical for a guy who got famous falling down.
Not at all. His birth name, Cornelius Crane Chase, born October 8th, 1943. And the first layer of complexity is right there in his nickname, Chevy.
Where did that come from?
It really tells you everything about the world he came from. It wasn't just short for Cornelius or something simple.
Mm.
No, it was given to him by his grandmother. And it came directly from the medieval English ballad, the Ballad of Chevy Chase. Yeah. She thought it was appropriate because they were descended from the Scottish clan Douglas. That one detail it paints a picture, doesn't it? High society history, deep family roots.
Wow. And when you start pulling on those family threads, the connections are, frankly, astonishing. And they seem totally at odds with his later comedic persona.
Completely. His maternal grandmother, for instance, she was adopted by Cornelius Vanderbilt Crane.
The heir to the Crane Company, the industrial fortune.
That's the one. Huge deal. And then his maternal grandfather was Rear Admiral Miles Browning.
The name sounds familiar.
He famously served as Admiral Raymond Spruance's chief of staff during the Battle of Midway in World War II. A pivotal figure.
So you've got war heroes, industrial tycoons.
Old world aristocracy sort of woven in there. And his father, Edward Tinsley Ned Chase, was a Princeton-educated book editor in Manhattan.
So a very rarefied, established, kind of upper crust background.
Definitely. He grew up, technically upper middle class, but surrounded by these echoes of immense historical wealth and power.
Yet the sources point to this really interesting, almost immediate pushback from him. His stepbrother mentioned that Chase himself really hated being defined by ancestry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he compared people who did that to potatoes. The best parts of them were underground.
Huh. That's quite a line.
Isn't it? If you think about that, it suggests this early, very active resistance against the elite pretension tied to his mother's side of the family.
Maybe that conflict right there, the blue blood background versus this desire for, anarchic self-definition, maybe that's the engine that drove his later rebellious, almost anti-establishment comedy.
It had to be a factor. You see this high intelligence, but also this anti-authoritarian streak popping up in his education. It wasn't exactly a smooth ride.
Yeah.
He attended the Riverdale Country School, but got expelled.
Okay.
He did manage to graduate as valedictorian from the Stockbridge School in '62, but his academic path stayed pretty unconventional.
Right. He went to Haverford College first.
Yeah, and even there he was apparently notorious for slapstick and physical comedy. Our sources mention this bizarre detail about him sticking forks into his orifices just for laughs.
Slight chuckle.
Okay.
Wow. Along with the pratfalls, I assume?
Exactly. Pure kind of anarchic performance art, even then. He eventually transferred to Bard College, apparently studied pre-med for a bit.
Pre-med? Really?
Briefly, but ultimately graduated in 1967 with a BA in English.
And graduating 67 put him right in the path of the Vietnam War draft, didn't it?
It did. And our sources detail a really startling account of how he handled that. Apparently, Chase managed to avoid the draft, got a 4F classification, by telling his draft board falsely that he had homosexual tendencies.
Wow, that was a significant claim to make back then to avoid service. A risky move.
It definitely speaks to an intense need for self-preservation, maybe desperation even,
Mm-hmm.
which becomes tragically, horribly understandable when you read the accounts of his childhood.
Yeah, this is where it gets really dark. The sources detail pretty extensive, systematic physical and psychological abuse. A 2007 biography went into it in depth.
It's chilling stuff. This is where you see the profound burden beneath the surface of that charismatic comedian.
Chase himself said, and this is a direct quote, "I lived in fear all the time, deathly fear."
God. The reports include things like being woken up at night by his mother just to be slapped repeatedly across the face,
Horrific.
being lashed on the backs of his legs, being locked in a bedroom closet for hours as punishment.
I mean, that's just devastating trauma for a child, especially cloaked in that seemingly privileged environment. And the abuse reportedly extended to his stepfather, too, Dr. John Cedarquist.
Yeah, accounts mention physical violence punches to the head and being confined to the basement for days when he was 14 after a school suspension.
To internalize that kind of fear and volatility from your parents, your step-parents, while also navigating the expectations of this high society family.
Yeah.
It provides a really vital key, I think, to understanding some of his later, often described as volatile professional behavior.
It creates this huge internal split, doesn't it? This sophisticated intellectual background clashing violently with terror and, the resulting emotional instability.
We have to acknowledge the weight of that trauma. It's a crucial lens for viewing his later anxieties, maybe even his dependence on physical comedy as a way to process or deflect that pain.
But before he fully channeled all that internal conflict into the comedy we know him for, he took this really surprising detour into music. This is one of those facts that always makes people do a double take.
Oh yeah, this is where it gets really interesting historically speaking. While he's at Bard, he played drums in a local band called the Leather Canary.
Okay.
And the other two main members of that band, the keyboardist and the bassist,
Who are they?
Walter Becker and Donald Fagen.
No, the Steely Dan guys.
The very same. The two guys who went on to basically define an era of complex, sophisticated rock and jazz fusion by founding Steely Dan. Chase was literally part of the early musical foundation for one of the most respected rock acts of the 70s.
That's incredible. I had no idea.
Right. He also played drums and keyboards for another band, Chameleon Church, a Boston psychedelic rock group. They even put out one album on MGM Records before breaking up.
So this unlikely kind of sophisticated musical apprenticeship happened right before he defined the raw physical side of American comedy. What a strange path.
Yeah, that musical phase eventually gave way to a pretty decisive shift. Chase moved into comedy full-time around 1973, but he actually spent years honing his skills in the underground scene, really laying the groundwork for the, meteoric rise that was about to happen.
Right. Between 67 and 74, he was super active. He co-founded an underground comedy group called Channel One back in 67. He wrote for Mad Magazine in 1970, just a short spoof of Mission Impossible, apparently. Then he worked briefly as a writer for that short-lived Smothers Brothers TV show Comeback in the spring of 75.
But the real incubator, where the SNL core team kind of came together, was the National Lampoon Radio Hour.
Ah, right. That makes sense.
By 73, he was a writer and cast member there, working right alongside the people who become the not ready for primetime players. John Belushi, Gilda Radner, Bill Murray.
A whole crew.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That show was basically the proving ground testing out that mix of counterculture satire and high-concept humor that was about to just explode onto network TV.
He also did some stage work, right?
Yeah, appeared in the off-Broadway review Lemmings and the film The Groove Tube in 1974, kind of building that resume.
So all of that led directly to October 1975 and the premiere of Saturday Night Live. And he wasn't just an original cast member. His presence, his persona, it immediately became central to the show's whole structure and rhythm.
Absolutely central. He got the most crucial, recurring bit of TV real estate, the cold open.
Right.
He introduced nearly every single episode of that first season with that now iconic, totally deadpan delivery. Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Often after falling down first.
Exactly. Often preceded by the show's signature bit, the fall of the week, pratfall. His physical comedy, which he'd clearly been practicing since college, became his instant trademark. It earned him immense, overnight fame.
And the biggest immediate cultural impact of that physical comedy was probably his recurring impression of President Gerald Ford.
Oh, definitely. He famously, brilliantly perfected mimicking that real-life moment where Ford tripped coming off Air Force One.
It was more than just a funny sketch, though, wasn't it?
It really was. It was almost like character assassination delivered through precise physical humor. Chase's constant portrayal of Ford as this bumbling klutz absolutely shaped public perception of the president.
Even though Ford was actually a pretty accomplished athlete in college.
Yeah, a star athlete, they called him. Completely unfair, arguably, but incredibly effective comedy. Chase actually became friendly with Ford later in life, but the comedic damage was definitely done.
It really cemented the show's power, didn't it, to impact real-world political views through satire and slapstick.
For sure. And then there was Weekend Update.
The original anchor.
He created that segment, became its immediate essential staple. And if you analyze the style he brought to it, it wasn't just reading news jokes, it was a full-on character performance.
I'm Chevy Chase.
And you're not. That catchphrase introduction just oozed what Rolling Stone later called deadpan arrogance.
And he'd sign off with that equally confident, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
He totally weaponized that persona. The jokes were often layered with his distinct, kind of sophisticated wit. You also saw his writing in segments like The News for the Hard of Hearing, where Garrett Morris would just shout the top story.
Classic.
What's crucial here, though, is Chase later claimed his version of Weekend Update was the direct inspiration for later news satire shows.
Like The Daily Show, Colbert Report.
Exactly. He argued he laid the foundational blueprint for how political comedy works on TV today, which, if true, means his influence stretches way beyond just his own performing career.
The industry certainly saw his immediate impact. The awards just poured in.
Right. 2 primetime Emmys for that single first season, 1 for performing, 1 for writing, plus a Golden Globe for his work on the show.
And Rolling Stone, years later, ranked him 10th overall among all the SNL cast members ever, specifically saying it only took him 1 season to define the whole franchise.
His fame just skyrocketed so fast that the media immediately started speculating about what was next for him. By 1975, a New York Magazine cover story literally called him the funniest man in America.
And NBC executives were publicly talking him up as the first real potential successor to Johnny Carson.
Which, in 1975 television, was basically the highest possible compliment, the ultimate goal.
But this is where that high wire act showed its first wobble, right? Chase immediately pushed back against the rumors, against the idea of that kind of long-term structure.
Yeah, he famously told New York Magazine he'd never be tied down for 5 years interviewing TV personalities. This aversion to structure, to long-term commitment, it really becomes a recurring theme, maybe stemming from that difficulty connecting, collaborating we talked about.
And that rejection created instant friction with the king of late night himself.
Oh, yeah. Carson, who generally wasn't a fan of the new SNL generation anyway, later delivered one of the most legendary and meanest late-night burns ever about Chase.
What did he say?
He said, he couldn't ad-lib a fart after a baked bean dinner.
Ouch. Brutal.
It perfectly captures that generational clash, right? The controlled, measured comedy of the old guard versus the new, fast, arrogant, almost contemptuous style Chase represented.
So despite this unprecedented success, he made that famously quick exit.
Yeah, left early in the second season. He was only the second original cast member to leave after George Coe.
Why did he say he left?
The official reason he gave was that his girlfriend at the time, Jacqueline Carlin, didn't want to move to New York, so he moved to L.A., married her.
And was famously replaced by Bill Murray.
Setting up a rivalry we definitely need to come back to later.
Absolutely. His quick departure was a shock, but he did maintain a connection, didn't he? Hosted SNL a bunch of times.
8 times, between 78 and 97. Though even his later hosting gigs, like in 97, sparked these persistent rumors about terrible on-set behavior, even getting banned. Claims Lorne Michaels later called idiotic.
But the drama, or at least the perception of volatility, always seemed to follow him around, even when the facts were a bit murky.
Totally. He left behind this legacy that was both immediate and defining, but it set him up for the huge challenge of transitioning that specific persona into movie stardom.
Leaving the biggest show on TV after just one season, that was a massive gamble. But Chase somehow managed to immediately establish himself as a dominant leading man in movies.
He really did. He famously turned down the role of Eric Otter Stratton in National Lampoon's Animal House.
Which became a huge instant classic. Why turn that down?
He said he wanted to pursue real acting, so he chose the romantic mystery comedy Foul Play in 1978 instead.
With Goldie Hawn.
Exactly. And that decision paid off big time. Totally validated the gamble. Foul Play was a smash hit. Grossed over $44 million. Earned Chase a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor.
So he proved his charm, that deadpan reaction thing could carry a whole feature film.
Definitely. But his physical comedy background, the very thing that made him famous on SNL, continued to take a literal physical toll on him.
Yeah, you mentioned something about an accident.
A really terrifying one. In 1980, filming the movie Modern Problems, there was this sequence where his character wears landing lights while dreaming he's an airplane.
Okay. Sounds like a typical Chevy Chase visual gag.
But the lights malfunctioned horribly. A strong electric current passed right through his arm, his back, his neck muscles.
Oh.
A near-death experience.
Oh my God. That's horrific.
Just an astonishing, dangerous thing to happen on a film set. And that incident happened shortly after his divorce from Jacqueline Carlin.
Wow. Double whammy.
Yeah, the combination of severe physical trauma and the marriage breakdown reportedly contributed to a significant period of deep depression for him.
And this connects back to what you were saying earlier, like the physical comedy, the source of his fame.
Was literally damaging his body. And subsequently, it seems, forcing him into a pattern of needing pain management, relying on prescriptions, a theme we definitely need to revisit later when we talk about health.
Great. But despite that physical and emotional cost, the 1980s became his absolute commercial peak. He went on this incredible run of iconic roles.
Starting with Caddyshack in 1980.
Ty Webb, the enigmatic, philosophical, rich golfer.
Such a unique character. The film was a cultural phenomenon, grossed $39 million on a tiny $6 million budget. It's become this enduring classic known for its anarchic humor, slapstick, and just endlessly quotable lines.
He followed that up quickly, too. Reunited with Goldie Hawn and Neil Simons. Seems like old times in 80.
Another hit, $43 million gross. But the role that really truly defined him for the masses was Clark Griswold. Starting in 83 with National Lampoon's Vacation.
Written by John Hughes, directed by Harold Ramis. Huge hit.
Massive. Grossed $61 million on a $15 million budget. It established the Griswold character, the suburban dad, well-meaning idiot, whose eternal optimism just leads to catastrophe.
It was his most successful film up to that point, and it created this persona that felt different from Ty Webb or, say, Fletch. Griswold was fundamentally vulnerable, kind of relatable, despite the absurdity.
Yeah, and then came 1985's Fletch, where he played Irwin Fletcher, the quick-witted, disguise-loving investigative reporter.
That character was like the absolute epitome of deadpan arrogance translated to film.
Totally. And that movie grossed over $50 million.
Yeah.
Led to the sequel in 89, Fletch Lives, which pulled in over $35 million. He'd found this clear, bankable formula, the charming, glib, kind of arrogant everyman thrown into total chaos.
And he proved he could work well with others, especially his old SNL buddies, when the chemistry clicked.
Right. He co-starred with Dan Aykroyd in Spies Like Us in 85. Made $60 million.
And Three Amigos in 86. With Steve Martin and Martin Short.
Produced by Lorne Michaels. Earned nearly $40 million. And Chase specifically said making Three Amigos was the most fun he ever had making a movie.
Which kind of reinforces that idea, doesn't it? He thrived in those high-stakes creative places when the camaraderie felt genuine, maybe less structured.
Seems that way. And if we just look at the money for a second, it shows the real height of his power back then.
How much was he making?
By the late 1980s, sources say Chase was commanding around $7 million per film.
$7 million in the late 80s.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, only a handful of stars, Maybe Eddie Murphy, Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson were getting that kind of paycheck then. He was, for a time, one of the absolute highest paid comedic actors in the world.
Wow, and that decade of dominance was really capped off by what's arguably his most durable film ever.
Has to be National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation in 1989.
Still watch it every year.
Everyone does. It grossed $71 million and just keeps generating revenue and cultural relevance decades later because it's a holiday movie. It ensures Clark Griswold is forever linked with his name.
Outside the box office, he was literally the face of Hollywood on its biggest nights. Hosted the Academy Awards twice.
Yeah, 87 and 88. He even opened the 88 show with one of his classic, sarcastic, boundary-pushing lines, quipped, "Good evening, Hollywood phonies."
Chuckles. Only he could get away with that.
It perfectly sums up his persona, right? The blue-blood insider using his talent to mock the very system paying him millions.
And we can't forget that iconic music video moment either.
Oh, you can call me Al. 1986 with Paul Simon. Jay's just perfectly lip-syncing all of Simon's lyrics. It cemented his presence across movies, TV, and the booming music video culture all at once. What a decade for him. But, despite that incredible high point in the 80s, the money, the cultural impact of the 1990s brought some pretty significant career turbulence. This is really the periods where that instability we've hinted at.
The aversion to structure, the difficulty with long-term collaboration.
Exactly. That stuff started to seriously impact his commercial success.
It was a rough patch. Really highlights how quickly a star can drop from that $7 million a picture level. He had 3 consecutive film flops right at the start of the decade.
Yeah, Nothing But Trouble in 91 that got Razzie nominations, then Memoirs of an Invisible Man in 92, and Cops and Robertsons in 94.
Critically panned, commercially disastrous. Their combined domestic gross was only, $34 million for 3 movies?
Yeah, brutal. But the single biggest failure, and maybe the most professionally humbling, was his attempt to break into late-night TV.
The Chevy Chase show, September 1993.
Launched on the Fox network. This was the moment, really, where that old NBC prediction that he was Carson's successor was finally put to the test.
And it failed spectacularly.
Infamously.
Yeah.
Canceled after only 5 weeks. Just completely crashed and burned.
Why do you think it failed so badly, looking back?
I think it really comes down to a clash between his specific persona and the actual demands of that format. Chase's whole style was based on anarchic energy, scripted deadpan delivery, physical gags.
Not spontaneous interviews or witty banter.
Exactly. Which is the absolute cornerstone of successful late-night hosting. The structure of a weeknight talk show, interviewing guests, dealing with constant scheduling, maintaining that nightly persona, it was precisely the kind of restrictive setup he'd rejected back in '75 when he bolted from SNL.
So the volatility, the arrogance that worked in short sketches
Proved disastrous when confined to an hour-long format 5 nights a week. He couldn't sustain it, or maybe didn't want to.
He did poke fun at himself later, though, right? In that Doritos Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, he showed some capacity for self-deprecation about it later on. And even during this professional downturn, his celebrity status remained pretty potent. He got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in '93.
And was Hasty Pudding's Man of the Year the same year?
Right. Confirming he was still seen as an icon, even when his current projects weren't landing.
He did have some smaller successes later in the 90s that kind of stabilized things. Man of the House in 95 made $40 million.
Vegas Vacation in '97, another Griswold outing, did okay, $36.4 million. And Snow Day in 2000 made over $60 million. So he kept working, stayed in the game.
But the real return to critical acclaim came quite a bit later in the late 2000s, which almost inevitably, it seems, also brought back that intense volatility.
And that brings us to Community, starting in 2009.
Back on NBC in this really critically acclaimed, clever sitcom, he played Pierce Hawthorne.
The aging, totally out of touch, kind of offensive, moist tell tycoon.
It was brilliant metacasting, wasn't it? Basically playing on his established public image. The New York Times even praised it, saying the character's sardonic repartee and slapdash nonchalance echoed his old Fletch days. Like, the casting itself was an inside joke about his fame.
The show really thrived on its smart writing, its ensemble. But the conflict started almost right away and just got worse, primarily because Chase grew really uncomfortable with where Pierce's character was going.
He got meaner, right, more bigoted.
Yeah, often cruel. And it started reflecting, maybe uncomfortably, some of the very real-life volatility and whimmered offset behavior that had followed Chase for years.
This tension blew up in that shocking incident in 2012.
Right. He had this explosive outburst on set, yelling, basically, that if the character kept going down this path, He might eventually be asked to call Donald Glover's or Yvette Nicole Brown's character the N-word in some misguided attempt at edgy comedy.
Wow. That's crossing a major line.
Huge line. An extreme, unfiltered expression of frustration that went way beyond professional disagreement. Even in a comedy writer's room context. He did apologize later for the outburst.
But the damage was done.
Pretty much. It just solidified this pattern, right? Difficulty accepting the long-term structured evolution of a character, especially one that maybe required him to expose or ridicule uncomfortable parts of his own aging public image.
So the result was, what, a mutual agreement for him to leave?
Yeah, he left the show due to these irreconcilable disagreements about the character, about the direction, and with the show's creator, Dan Harmon.
Interestingly, after he left, Chase apparently claimed the show wasn't funny enough.
Which kind of contradicts all the critical praise it got. His character was eventually killed off in the 5th season. The whole arc just perfectly encapsulates the paradox. Incredible talent delivering brilliant moments, but limited ability to maintain those long-term collaborative professional bonds.
And this pattern of conflict, it goes way back, right back to his early post-SNL days. We have to talk about that infamous 1978 fistfight with Bill Murray backstage at SNL.
Oh, yeah. The stuff of legend. Happened when Chase came back to host after leaving. It just highlights the intense rivalry simmering since Murray replaced him.
Where did it happen? Who saw it?
Sources say it was in John Belushi's dressing room, witnessed by pretty much the entire remaining original cast.
What started it?
Apparently, Murray made a really derogatory comment about Chase's then-troubled marriage to Jacqueline Carlin. Chase fired back, criticizing Murray's physical appearance. It got ugly fast.
Lorraine Newman later called it very sad and painful and awful. Said both guys immediately went for the thing that would hurt the other one the most.
It shows this deep underlying tension, doesn't it? Rooted in professional jealousy, the whole departed star versus replacement dynamic, and just raw personal vulnerability.
But despite how intense that fight was, they somehow reconciled enough to start together in Caddyshack just 2 years later, in 1980.
Which shows that sometimes, I guess, professional necessity or maybe just the appeal of a great project could outweigh even a really bitter personal feud, at least for a while.
Okay, let's turn to his personal life for a bit. He's been married 3 times, correct?
That's right. First marriage was to Suzanne Hewitt from 73 to 76. Then to Jacqueline Carlin, the one whose reluctance to move to New York was cited for his SNL departure. That lasted from 76 to 80. No children from those first 2 marriages.
But he found long-term stability with his 3rd wife.
Yes, Janie Luke. They married in 1982 and are still together today. They have 3 daughters, Sydney, Kaylee, and Emily, and they live up in Bedford, New York now.
And there's that interesting little detail about him being honorary mayor of Pacific Palisades back in the 80s.
Yeah, between 86 and 88.
Yeah.
Just a little footnote showing some civic engagement amidst all the Hollywood chaos.
We also need to circle back to the substance abuse issues because they seem so directly tied into the career narrative we've been building.
Definitely. Our sources are pretty explicit that his initial use of prescription painkillers started back in 1986. And it was due to chronic, ongoing back pain.
Pain resulting from?
Directly from his career choice. Specifically related to all the physical comedy, the constant pratfalls he performed, especially on SNL and in those early films.
And that near-death electric shock incident in 1980 probably didn't help things long-term either.
Likely exacerbated everything. So the very thing that made him famous, the physical comedy, was literally breaking down his body, which then led directly to addiction issues.
He went into treatment.
Yeah, he entered the Betty Ford Center in 1986, specifically for prescription painkiller addiction. And then much later, in 2016, he sought treatment again, entering the Hazelden Clinic, this time for alcoholism.
It really highlights how that complex mixed the internal turmoil from his childhood, maybe, combined with the physical demands and damage from his career, led to this long pattern of self-medication and substance reliance. It's a tough cycle.
Very tough. Now, shifting gears slightly, looking at his public and political side, Chase is generally identified as a political liberal, right?
Yeah, and he's been quite active over the years as an environmentalist and philanthropist. Campaigned for Democrats like Bill Clinton in the 90s, John Kerry in 2004, endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2008.
But his political outspokenness sometimes manifested in that same kind of volatile, unfiltered way we saw it directed at colleagues.
You're thinking of that 2004 incident.
Exactly. During a speech at a People for the American Way benefit, a typically liberal group, mind you, he delivered these incredibly controversial remarks, just savaging the then-President George W. Bush.
What did he say again?
He called Bush an uneducated, real-lying schmuck and a dumb fuck.
On stage. At a benefit.
Yeah. The comments were apparently so extreme they upset both the event organizers and people in the generally sympathetic audience.
It just shows that tendency again, doesn't it? That comedic persona built on deadpan arrogance and pushing boundaries often lack the filter needed for well-structured professional settings or even political discourse.
Absolutely. But despite all the career ups and downs, the personal issues, the recurring conflicts, Chase has shown some real enduring star power, especially in recent years. The sheer power of his most famous character, Clark Griswold, brought him back.
That 2015 vacation movie, the reboot sequel thing.
Right. He reprised the role for just a brief but pretty pivotal cameo in that fifth installment, also just called Vacation. And even though critics mostly hated the movie,
It made a ton of money, didn't it?
yeah, over $107 million worldwide, which just confirms that the cultural attachment people have to those iconic 80s characters, especially Griswold, remains incredibly strong.
He also popped up in Hot Tub Time Machine, too, around the same time, 2015.
And more recently, he starred with Richard Dreyfuss in that Netflix movie The Last Laugh in 2019.
And he's listed in a new Christmas movie coming out, The Christmas Letter, with Randy Quaid and Brian Doyle Murray.
Right, so it shows his enduring celebrity, particularly in that kind of ensemble or family comedy space, still draws him back into projects, often playing on their classic comedic persona, even if his relationship with the actual structure of Hollywood seems, well, persistently strained. So if we try to tie this whole history together, connect it to the bigger picture, the story of Chevy Chase is really one of immense, immediate, almost singular talent, isn't it?
Undeniable.
I mean, a generational talent. Won multiple Emmys in his first year out, commanded a $7 million salary at his absolute peak, fundamentally defined the style and tone of modern sketch comedy. This incredible talent was consistently, dramatically contrasted with the volatility of his personal interactions. That 1978 fistfight with Bill Murray, the abrupt, explosive exit from Community, the infamous short-lived talk show disaster. He was, professionally and personally, just this constant high-wire act of comedy and conflict.
So what does it all mean then? I mean, he was an undeniable cultural force. He transformed slapstick for a new generation, often delivering comedic performances that looked completely effortless on screen.
Deceptively effortless.
Right, yet his genius clearly came at a cost. His career journey was just marked by these intensely complex relationships, both in his personal life, maybe stemming, like you said, from that difficult, abusive, yet highly privileged background, and definitely in his professional life, where the basic demands of collaboration seemed to constantly clash with his, I guess, anarchic personality.
Indeed. And that leads us to the final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder. For someone whose entire career hinged on perfectly timed physical comedy and that projection of effortless charm, why did the transition to structured long-term collaboration, whether it was in a writer's room, on a nightly talk show set, or anchoring a sitcom for years, why did that consistently prove to be his most difficult, almost career-defining challenge?
We've seen how maybe that trauma-driven need for self-preservation, for control, combined perhaps with the physical toll his craft took on him, maybe created a personality fundamentally resistant to the vulnerability and compromise that long-term teamwork requires.
Exactly. That's something to consider as you reflect on this deep dive into the complex, often contradictory, undeniably impactful history of Chevy Chase.